Oh, okay. You can begin, Councillor Kober.
Perfect. Thank you to the Hackney's IT team for making this possible. Welcome everyone to the Skills Economy and Growth Scrutiny Commission meeting for today's 25th of January. We're very pleased to sort of be welcoming you to this meeting. Obviously, as you all know, we're continuing with our meetings online, and this will be available via YouTube either currently now as you're viewing, or you can catch up with the video sort of thereafter. Before we do kick off, there was a couple things that I just wanted to go through just as technical points for all the guests and members in the meeting. Please make sure that you're on mute as the event is progressing, just to make sure that we're able to sort of do this in a way that's sort of very less sort of disturbing for others, and so that it's quite clear for everyone to hear each other. This video is also being recorded as well, so you should be aware of that, and it's being live streamed right now, as I've made that as I've said that already. This meeting is in public, but it's not a public meeting, therefore only those who are invited to speak may do so. This is a formal meeting of Hackney Council, and all the usual constitutional requirements of council meetings still apply, and this is a formal meeting. Please do note that the press may be in attendance. The rights of the press and public to record and film the meeting will apply. Members and invited participants have all been sent a calendar invite, which has enabled you to join this meeting via Google Meet. So thank you for joining us, to the commission members and also to the cabinet members who have joined us today. A small number of us may be joining us via telephone, or I'm not aware of anyone on Google Meet via phone right now. If there is anything, I will keep you informed. There may be a message that pops up on the screen to admit an external guest to the meeting. Please do not press accept. This will be actioned by the overview and scrutiny officer, in this case Tim, who has the meeting attendee list. Anyone not participating in the meeting has been directed to observe the meeting via the live stream video link, which is available via the council website on the meeting agenda web page. Please can you keep your microphones on mute, as I've already mentioned, to make sure there's no audio feedback. Please only unmute your mic when you're required to make a presentation or to ask a question or to answer a question. All members and meeting participants should keep their cameras on, as I need to see the full grid video to enable me to chair the meeting. I will ask members of the commission to make contributions. I am aware some of you might keep your video off, not a problem. The chat function is here if you would like to just inform me that you would like to make a point. Otherwise, I just need to see you on the screen if you're trying to raise your hand. So Gilbert, I can see you're not on camera right now. That's not a problem. Don't feel pressure to come on camera. But if you do go on camera, if you're not on camera, just please indicate via the chat box. And the chat box is not there to have a general conversation. Please keep it free. It's just only for technical points. And then, yeah, if you'd like to speak, raise your hand via camera. Well, there's quite a lot of instructions to go through here. I thought that was the first page, and there's still another page to go through, so that's great. I'm just check through, just make sure that I think I've mentioned most things. Yeah, and finally, there's a subtitle function as well called called captions, which you can turn on, and is a very useful feature. Should anyone deliberately disrupt the meeting, I'll give 2 verbal warnings, and if they persist, I'm able to remove that person from the meeting, and they will not be allowed back in. So, kicking off the meeting now. Today is our yearly cabinet question time. As you all know, we have 3 cabinet members who are usually sort of linked to this commission. It's cabinet members Councillor Carol Williams and Councillor Guy Nicholson. We usually did have another cabinet member also for transport as well, but due to sort of the vacant role, we're obviously only joined by 2 cabinet members right now. So before I start the meeting, I just wanted to see if there's any apologies for absences. I'm not aware that there are any apologies for absences. I think we're all full team here today, and yes, we are. Number 2, is there any urgent items? There are none from my side as chair, unless there's anything else from any other members. I'm happy to continue. Nope. Okay. Are there any declarations of interest that members would like to declare? Nope. Okay, we proceed. Just as another rule as well to this meeting, if I ask a question, if I don't get any responses, I'll just take that on as I move on. So you don't have to sort of unmute yourself to say no. Right. So we've got the minutes from the previous meetings. The reason why I say meetings is because we didn't agree the meetings of the previous meeting. So we have 2 meeting minutes that we have to approve. Councillor Palace, I believe you've got your hand raised. If you would like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'd just like to propose 2 quick amendments.
Sure.
In the minutes from the previous meeting, I've mentioned this to Tim, but it's point 611.1, a reduction in the control parking hours in Cazenove ward. Could that read? So whether a reduction in the controlled parking hours in Cazenove ward,
Sure.
And then 6.12.1 on the line, it may mean it's wise to pause schemes that seek to reduce bus lanes. Could that be the change, please?
Yes, that will be action. Thank you, Councillor Palace.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any other matters in relation to the minutes, or is everyone happy to agree both minutes? The members agree? Yeah.
Agreed. Yep.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed.
So that now takes me on to the 5th item on the agenda, which is that we something that we started last time on the suggestion of Councillor Lufkin, which was around sort of stats at the start of meetings. And as you remember in the previous meeting, I took us through some sort of basic stats. Unfortunately, we don't have those for this meeting today, so we will continue proceeding with that from the next meeting onwards. And obviously, what we can do, Tim, if it's possible, is once we do get those stats, we can sort of circulate it to the commission members via email and then continue from there. So now moving on to sort of the main agenda item on the agenda, which is the cabinet question time. Firstly, I'd like to say a massive welcome to Councillor Carol Williams and Councillor Guy Nicholson. Thank you so much for your time. I should at this point just do a quick round of introductions. I know we all know each other in the Google Hangout Google Meet room, but just for those who may be watching this meeting after, so if you could just say, I will call you, if I can call you out and then you just nominate someone after you introduce who hasn't gone, that would be great. So my name is Mete Koban. I'm a councillor for Stoke Newington and chair of the commission. I'd like to nominate Councillor Polly Billington, please.
I'm Councillor Polly Billington for De Beauvoir ward and vice chair of the Scrutiny Commission. I nominate Councillor Palace.
Hello, I'm Councillor Sam Palace. I am one of the Cazenove ward councillors, and I'd like to nominate Councillor Race.
Hi, Councillor Steve Race, Hoxton East and Shoreditch. I'm going to nominate Councillor Lufkin.
Hi, I'm Councillor Lufkin for the Shacklewell ward, and I nominate Councillor Smythe.
Thank you. My name's Councillor Smith, and I am Councillor in Stoke Newington ward. Thank you. I nominate, who's left? Councillor Williams.
My name's Carol Williams. I am a councillor and cabinet member for employment, skills and human resources. I'm a councillor in Hoxton West ward. I will nominate Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, thanks. Councillor Nicholson. I'm councillor in Homerton ward and I'm cabinet member for planning, culture and the inclusive economy. And I'm back to you, Chair. No one left to nominate.
Yep. Just by way of quick introduction as well, we've also got Tim as well. Tim, do you want to just say who you are?
Yeah, my name's Tim Upton, and I'm the Scrutiny Officer for the Skills, Economy and Growth Commission.
Thank you very much. Great. So thank you all again for joining us here today, and for your time, for both our guests as well. So how this typically runs for the cabinet question time is that we've got both cabinet members here today with us. If it's okay, just as a quick question to each of you, is it okay if we sort of do it in turn? Yeah, and does any of you have a preference on who goes first, or?
Councillor Williams. I went first last time, Chair.
I nominate Councillor Nicholson just because I can. So over to you, Councillor Coban, to decide who goes first.
Oh, great. I've got the great pleasure of deciding. I think I'm going to sort of, you know what, I'll take your suggestion, Councillor Williams. I've got the final say. So the way this section typically works is obviously we've sent through areas in relation to your portfolios. There is no sort of, I guess, like requirement for you to do like you don't have to do an update, but I think if you wanted to sort of just do like a by way of introduction about a 5-minute update just in relation to your portfolio around the areas that we've sort of suggested to you. So Councillor Nicholson, in your case, it will specifically be looking at sort of town centres, vibrancy and local jobs. And of course, you know, the other thing is as well, like we know with the current situation with COVID, the situation is sort of like continuously evolving as well. So if there's anything that you feel that is important for the Commission to sort of be aware of, it would be great to have like a bit of an intro from you, an update, and then we can then sort of start with the questions.
Sorry, Chair, would you like me to go first?
Yeah, and then we can then sort of follow up with some questions. Yeah.
Fine. Sorry. Thanks, Chair. If I could, I think it's worth, since we kind of last all convened in sort of late autumn, early winter, as you rightly pointed out, circumstances in the kind of local economy and indeed the wider economy have continued to kind of change and quite profoundly, as you've already touched upon. I know that there are colleagues who've got questions around various sectors, but one of those sectors is clearly around the hospitality sector. I think it might be worth, just as part of an introduction, just sort of taking some of the national kind of snapshots about what's sort of going on within that particular sector, the hospitality and leisure sector. At the moment, there is approximately 1 in 3 hospitality businesses in the country that are still trading. Now, that doesn't mean that the other 2/3 are no longer in existence. They're just not trading as we currently speak. It is assumed that the kind of total numbers who are sort of in receipt of furloughing at the moment in terms of employees has dropped from where it was sort of in the kind of first phases of the lockdown when furloughing was first implemented, from numbers in the order of about 9 million people in receipt of furlough payments. That has now dropped to about somewhere between 4 and 5 million people. So clearly, as we lurch from lockdown to lockdown, what's going on is a kind of general pattern, and that pattern seems to be about a very, very painful, slow, but gradual reopening of the economies going on around us. We could sit here and no doubt, I'm sure, we could spend most of the evening talking about or debating or discussing informally just sort of all of the various nuances around that, you know, how it seems as if around us people are beginning to work around COVID and accepting that there is this virus out there and trying to put in place various practices that manage and control the spread of the virus, but enable some form of business to start opening and to start functioning again. But clearly there are still sectors in both the local economy and the national economy that are falling outside of that. And unfortunately, I think what we can all see is that Hackney is host to a significant proportion of businesses within its local economy that land in those sectors. So that could be hospitality, as we've touched upon. It could be around leisure, the arts, culture, the creative industries in that regard. These are all service sector related industries, rely on bringing together large numbers of people, and all of them are struggling as a result of the pandemic. And how have we responded to that? Well, we have as a council, and I'm sure we can touch upon this in some of the questions and answer session coming up, but we have as far as the council is concerned, we have tried to make sure that the council is supporting where it can support, investing where it can invest, both in terms of time and money, as well as with space. Equally, it's also about our combined capacity as a force for lobbying, in terms of trying to kind of refine, change, enhance, redirect government policy when it comes to supporting the economy and everybody operating within it. There's clearly some very, very serious sort of problems being confronted by the cultural and leisure sectors. And I think with the recent announcement, for example, which, you could argue it doesn't directly have an impact on the London Borough of Hackney, but for example, the cancellation of Glastonbury for the second year running is a kind of very, very clear signal that places like our theatres, our clubs, for example, our music venues, places such as sort of places of performance of one description or another, whether they are open air or whether they're in enclosed spaces, are not going to be in a position to reopen and refunction before the summer. So that really then sort of focuses our mind on, okay, well, what kind of things is it that we might think as a council, as perhaps a sort of, a significant influencer in our local economy, what is it that might be helpful? Is it a continuation of the business rates exemption initiative, for example? Should we be lobbying for an extension to that beyond April so that business rates are suspended for a further period of time? Should this be sector specific, or should it just be more of a general sort of kind of blanket approach to the economy? Should VAT be kind of lifted? Certainly, again, this may be a case of focusing in on certain sectors. I think what we're all noticing is that those colleagues who run the major supermarkets, and I'm sure we've all come across the headlines over the last few months, where I think almost without exception, all major supermarkets have actually paid their business rates. They've just written the check, sent it off to the Treasury saying, look, we don't need the grants. We don't need the subsidy. We don't need that support. We are trading. We're in kind of full operation, full flow, and we're going to pay our business rates. And they took the decision to do that. Now, clearly, again, that's just another indicator that some sectors are doing well. Others are finding it extraordinarily difficult. The more local initiatives that we're doing, and phase 2 of the Love Hackney Shop Local initiative is literally about to launch by the end of this month with a new kind of portfolio of films and film shorts and things of that nature. Again, just sort of emphasizing to local residents, to shop local, to use those businesses that we have upon our local high streets. They are a real asset. Use them, deploy with them, and they will make sure that you can shop safely and so on and so forth, and you will get good value. Equally, the work around kind of where we want to go next. What is it that sort of infrastructure wise? Now, I recall some months back now, Chair, that we kind of sat and we spoke about digital infrastructure, for example. We spoke about an investment into digital infrastructure within the borough to connect up the borough, not just residents with residents, but also residents with business and businesses with businesses. Again, this infrastructure question is still there, but this time the council is bringing forward an initiative around bringing forward the start of a community kind of rooted digital infrastructure network. These are kind of sort of good steps in the right direction. When you start to sort of look at other elements of doing business, and I'll kind of obviously kind of sort of hand over, if I may, to Councillor Williams, just about the business of employment, the business of skills, the business about jobs. But clearly there are some sectors which, if we're trying to protect jobs within, certainly for the coming 6 months, then furloughing must continue for those sectors. It may come down to us to define what those sectors might be that we may wish to put our kind of sort of full support behind in a call to the Chancellor to extend it for those sectors. But it is clear that there is a kind of widening national call coming from various different quarters to start now tailoring government-led investment and support into sectors of our economy, and that's something that we may wish to reflect on, in terms of the work programme, in terms of our lobbying, in terms of our kind of core messaging, if that makes sense, Councillor Coburn. Sorry, Chair. Look, shall I stop there, and then perhaps we can go on to the questions, or however is you see fit, or if you wish, Councillor Williams, to do an introduction, then obviously over to you. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I think that for sort of like this, the purpose of kind of like more focus, we'll keep them to sort of separately. But if there are, Councillor Williams, if there's anything that you specifically felt like you wanted to come in on, no, yeah, we'll come. Yeah, okay, great. So yeah, I mean, thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I think it's been very useful to kind of get an update and just hear about, the state of the economy locally. I know it's obviously sort of changing by, day by day or week by week or month by month. And obviously I appreciate it's very difficult for yourself and, the administration and of course, officers to sort of like to do, there's only so much you could plan for so many different scenarios that might arise out of sort of a situation that's very unknown. But we obviously very much firstly just wanted to be on record just to sort of, to appreciate and thank you for your hard work and your leadership specifically in these sort of areas. To kick off, did any commission members have any questions, or would you be happy with me kicking off first? The finger's pointing at me. Okay, great. So obviously Councillor Nicholson, we had a conversation before, particularly around I'm thinking specifically around town centres right now, and I'm thinking specifically around the local businesses that you've obviously mentioned. We know that obviously the government had introduced, a range of different economic measures to sort of mitigate sort of the impact of COVID on local businesses, and obviously, it's been quite, in many ways, Hackney's response to that has been quite tremendous in terms of making sure we're rolling out the grants and the schemes to help and support those businesses. Although be it like, we've been we've had the like problems around the cyber attack, and I know that's obviously may had its impact. So it'll be good to, one, just as a quick update just for the commission, I don't want to get too much into it, but just to understand what impact the cyber attack may have had on the support that we have for local businesses and the delay and how that's sort of going on. And then the second thing is just in relation to that is obviously one of the key things is the business rate reliefs. Obviously, it was given a year-long holiday until April, well, to this financial year. And I just wanted to get an update on, what the council's position is on record, and obviously what, if you are aware of sort of any lobbying efforts towards government or any sort of any indication on what's sort of likely to happen to that, as I know that a lot of businesses will be worrying if that sort of comes back into play, as they're obviously struggling right now as it is.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I start with just the business rates first, and the extending the exemption for the payment of business rates beyond April. As we currently speak, Chair, government have not responded to the call to extend the current arrangements beyond April. Now, they haven't said anything, so I should just make sure that that's what's on the record. However, there are, as you could probably imagine, and I can confirm that the council is one of these organisations, quite a large number of organisations of one description or another, both in the commercial sector and in the public sector, who are calling for an extension to the business rates holiday beyond April. And that lobbying continues, and one can only assume that this is probably heading for an announcement in March around the Chancellor's sort of spring budget, spring statement, whatever it will be described as. So I think that there's every reason for the Commission to add its weight to that call. Of course, the Commission may decide otherwise, but it's certainly something definitely worth kind of reflecting on. And there are clearly at least sort of numbers of sectors, if not all business rates payers, but numbers of sectors that are really looking to an extension. And I mentioned earlier figures of things like 6 months for further reliefs and so on and so forth. The other aspect of this, and this flips over to the business grants side of things, is that we've made sure that the Mayor has been lobbying the Chancellor to extend the business grants programme. And again, this may become sector specific rather than just a generic business rates kind of sort of set of exemptions or grants coming forward, sorry. But nevertheless, calling for a rolling programme of grants to be kind of delivered over the course of the coming kind of at least 4 to 5 months, because quite clearly there are sectors that are just not permitted to open their doors at all to any form of business as things currently stand. When you add in problems of supply chain issues and indeed the capital required to kind of forward finance an opening, this sort of kind of push me, pull you approach to, for example, the hospitality sector has not been helpful for all of those involved in that particular sector of the economy. You know, suddenly 1 minute you're all opening up and the next you're being told to close. But of course, you've got a stock room that's filled with capital outlay, in other words, produce that you would have been selling. And of course, it just sits there rotting away. So it's sort of, there are some serious implications, and I think it's fairly kind of sort of apparent that the sector's had the stuffing knocked out of it, and no pun intended there, Chair. But it's sort of, in terms of the cyber attack on the council, Chair, and its impact on what's been going on with business rates, look, clearly this is still subject to a criminal investigation, so we do all have to be a little careful about what it is that we talk about publicly, just whilst that investigation is still ongoing. But suffice it to say, there have been a number of services, which I think everybody is aware of, that have been quite severely impacted and that is affecting quite a lot of people in our community, in the borough. One of those services is, of course, access to kind of information held on the system in regards to business rate payers, for example. Now, there is no kind of sort of cause for concern here about any personal financial data being lost or hacked into or anything of that nature. And we must reassure everybody out there in business that they're not at risk of kind of fraud from all of this, but from the cyber attack. But what it does mean is that access to information to process things in some cases has been lost. In other cases, it's been fine because it's on a different system, because they were obviously part of more recent grant initiatives, and so those details and that data is held securely on another on another system. It is worth saying that actually everybody around the Hackney Business Grants team, who has sort of come from across the council, led by the business rates team and the area regeneration team, are delivering. They're on schedule to deliver. The instruction is no money is to be returned to the Treasury. No money is to be returned to central government. It is all to be distributed amongst Hackney's businesses. So far, Chair, to date, no money has been returned to the Chancellor. All of it has got out the door. And there is every indication that cyber attack or no cyber attack, Chair, the monies for the current grant programs, of which there are currently 8 different grant programs in motion as we speak, all of that is scheduled to be out of the door over the coming 2 months. Sorry, thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson, and for updating us on those points as well. Councillors, any questions or comments? I've got Councillor. Okay, so I've got with everyone. So I'm going to go for Councillor Palace first, then Councillor Race, then Councillor Smythe, then Councillor Lufkin. But I'll start with Councillor Palace.
All right, if I may, Chair, I've got 2 questions, but they'll be hopefully quite quick. One is relating to COVID, and one is relating to neighbourhood SIL. So the first one related to COVID is about obviously our art sector, which is really suffering during this period. It's one of the industries which obviously cannot literally open its doors, and that's the only way it can function. I was just wondering, Councillor Nicholson, if you could say a bit more about how we are supporting basically the arts kind of sector, and also about the Cultural Recovery Fund, and what we are doing as a kind of council, to support not only kind of MPOs but also sole traders to apply for that. Thank you.
Sorry, shall I answer Councillor Palace's?
Yeah, I think we should go one by one. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Fine. Thanks, Councillor Palace. In terms of the arts sector, Councillor Palace, and what it is that the council has been doing to support the sector, it has been proactively supporting the sector in their applications to the Cultural Recovery Fund. And by proactive support, what I'm talking about here are personal endorsements and letters of support to go in with their applications. So as organisations are making their applications, and that is rolling out as we speak, which I'm sure you're aware, those letters of endorsement are going in, and they're being coordinated by the Cultural Development team. The Mayor is very keen to add his support to these applications. And that work is ongoing as we speak. There are, I have to say, Councillor Palace, there are also some extraordinary examples of best practice, is the best way of describing it, coming from many Hackney arts-based organisations that are operating in the arts and cultural sector. I mean, best practice that is quite extraordinary, you know, how they've kind of responded to these extraordinarily difficult times in terms of running a business, because as you know, Councillor Palace, that's what they're doing. They're running businesses, and okay, it's in the arts sector, it's in the cultural sector, well, however you wish to describe it, but they are businesses nevertheless. So there's a great deal of work going on. I would also add to this, Councillor Palace, that the Council's relationship with Arts Council England is as strong as it's ever been before. So much so that I understand from the other day that they're now presenting, and Councillor Palace, I'm sure you should take some credit for this, as you directly fed into it. They're now using Hackney's arts and cultural strategy, that piece of policy, as best practice, and using that to demonstrate to other local authorities elsewhere an approach that is seen as, again, good practice. So congratulations, Councillor Palace. It's some good work, and thanks for your contributions on that. In terms of the neighbourhood SIL,
sorry, Gar, could I just ask a specific on the neighbourhood sill, and just very quickly, because I've seen in the local, in the new white paper which is being put forward, that there's obviously proposals to change how the levy operates, and I was just wondering how that's going to affect our proposals around neighbourhood sill, particularly the metrics that are kind of local level that we're going to be looked at ward level, and whether that kind of changes the dynamic. But and thank you for all the work you've obviously been doing in the arts strategy, which has made such a difference.
Those council pads. And yeah, in terms of neighbourhood sill, just two very quick things. The first is just progress in where Hackney's neighbourhood sill has got to in terms of reshaping itself into, let's call it a culture fund, for want of a better way of describing it at this stage. Councillor Palace, that paper is literally about to land in February as a draft paper for us all to reflect on, have a look at, and refine. It's all heading in the right direction, and the Mayor is extremely keen to kind of deploy this neighbourhood sill sooner rather than later. So I think perhaps a kind of a sensible and conservative kind of prediction is perhaps we're looking at early summer for the release of this fund, and hopefully it will be able to kind of build on some of the kind of good funding practice that we have already in place, as was the original plan, but also complement the Cultural Recovery Fund and Arts Council England's investments that are in parallel with the Cultural Recovery Fund. So it's in motion, and perhaps, Councillor Palace, this is something that we can obviously pick up over the next couple of months as the paper lands, if that's of interest. In terms of the government's planning white paper, the planning reforms white paper that came forward, and their proposals for reshaping and redesigning planning gain, how it is collected and how it is then redistributed. I think just for everybody's benefit, what was being proposed in draft in these reforms was that basically planning gain would be centralised through central government, and the planning gain would bypass the local. It would come back to the local, but retrospectively. There was little indication given in the planning reforms as to how that decision would be arrived at, and you're absolutely right, Councillor Pellis, is that there's every indication that anything that was remotely attached to planning gain was going to be used almost exclusively for the delivery of 300,000 homes per annum somewhere in the country. That wouldn't mean that actually the principles about investing into infrastructure or contributing to the cost of infrastructure, things like neighbourhood sill, for example, none of that featured in any of that kind of planning reform white paper. At this moment in time, the council and indeed politically were completely unaware of where it is that government may wish to go with all of this, other than to say that we did object to that proposal as a council and as an administration. And then finally, I think it's worth just sort of pointing out that we are all working, so politically, on the assumption, Councillor Palace, that the current legislation is such that it protects existing sums of money, those that have already been collected, from being, let's call it, requisitioned by central government in, say, 2 years' time or 3 years' time, or whenever it is that they may introduce some form of planning reform. So for the time being, the focus is to, rather like the business grants, not send anything to the Chancellor.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe I had Councillor Race next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Nicholson, for coming along this evening, and for the update that you gave at the beginning of the meeting. You'll probably have found out by now that despite the terrible year that hospitality has had including in Hackney. 3 Hackney restaurants tonight have received their first Michelin stars, which is a great achievement for them, and great to continue have Hackney on the map in that way. Councillor Nixon, I wonder if you could let us know to what extent is Hackney Council able to monitor in real time the sort of shape of the and the kind of health of the local economy, and coming out of that, are there any particular areas that are concerning for you in terms of the, I would have thought the kind of town centre areas and the kind of retail areas such as Shoreditch and areas in Hackney Central, and what, if any, plans that the council are currently thinking about in terms of supporting those areas as we at some point during the year, hopefully, will be exiting the lockdown, and we may be left with specific areas that with quite a lot of empty property, with a local, those local economies really kind of suffering, and it'd be good to get a sort of insight from you about what's the longer term view of how we come out of this in terms of Hackney Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Race. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Race. In terms of a kind of, let's call it a local economic observatory kind of function, in other words, just sort of kind of measuring and analysing. I think on a previous kind of meeting and following some of the Commission's deliberations on a kind of sort of a local economic review, some of those recommendations focused very much on establishing some form of resource which could be picking up on the local, basically, and that I think the Commission, yourself and colleagues, kind of rightly identified that national statistics take us all so far. Useful, yes, but only so far when it comes to the local, and to be able to kind of analyse what's going on at that kind of ultra local level is quite important and very relevant. And I think so as we speak, Councillor Race, there is some work that's been commissioned in the Shoreditch area, looking at the Shoreditch economy and just trying to kind of sort of unpick kind of the current state of play when it comes to business and the economy and the various different sectors that are operating in that particular kind of part of our borough, which, as you know, you're very familiar with that particular area and its economy. As you know, it's very specific. That work should be kind of available for us in a month or two's time, so that we can start to kind of get an understanding about what is helpful, what is workable, and what perhaps we might want to enhance it with, and so on and so forth. There are still questions to be kind of answered about rolling that out across a borough, obviously, but that's more of a kind of, I think once this sort of initial work has been completed, that kind of conversation is a bit easier to have than as we speak at this moment in time. In the meantime, it's been very much a case of aligning ourselves very closely with local business associations. That includes the Hackney branch of the Federation of Small Businesses. It also includes the East End Trades Guild, for example, so that we're beginning to get an understanding about exactly what it is that's going on the ground from organisations such as those. We are also in a position where the council is now more active in numbers of kind of sort of various business forums of one description or another than I think it ever has been in the past. The Hackney Business Network itself is now upwards of over 7,000 members attached to it who are receiving those regular updates, and that number still seems to be growing as we speak. All of this is showing to a whole new dialogue, which, when we look back to May of last year, well, actually before then, April of last year and the start of the lockdown, it was a very, very kind of sort of different picture about relationships and dialogue and an understanding, and that has come on leaps and bounds. Unfortunately, it's taken a bit of a crisis and a catastrophe to kind of bring that change about, but nevertheless it has come about. So perhaps there's a kind of a positive thing to take away from the whole COVID kind of sort of the horrible COVID mess that we're all having to confront at the moment. So I think this is perhaps something to reflect on in terms of your future work program and where it is that you might want to go, how you might want to engage with that analysis, and then to inform and direct it, really. I think everybody in the council would be in the Commission's hands in regards to, you know, how it may then evolve going forward. That's all. In terms of the Michelin stars, Councillor Race, I think perhaps we should be formally noting our congratulations in the minutes. And as you rightly point out, there was quite an interesting comment made this morning, I think, on the Today programme by Howard Davis. So Howard Davis, who's the chair of the NatWest Group, amongst other things now, where he kind of he quoted some figures, and forgive me, I'm probably going to get them all wrong actually as we do it, but the figures he quoted was something like there was still 2.4% of restaurants open and trading, but he was at a loss as to working out where those restaurants were. Now clearly 3 of them are probably in Hackney who have managed to get their Michelin star rating. But anyway, sorry, Councillor Race, I think, is that answer adequate enough? If not, please do.
It is, thank you. I wonder if I could just get a quick supplementary in. Would you mind? Thank you. Councillor Nicholson, so thank you for that. It's really helpful, and the local observatory data report will be great to see when it comes out. Just my question coming off the back of that would be around, are we specifically measuring sentiment as part of that as well? Because obviously quite a lot of businesses are currently being held afloat by artificial funding, essentially from the government through the furlough scheme and through business rates kind of grants and various other grants and things like that. And so some will be looking forward and raring to go when it starts, and others will be essentially thinking about when it's time to close down, I would have thought. So will we get some kind of sentiment as part of that as well, and sort of be able to break out the companies that see themselves having a pretty good future when things return to normal, and those who are a bit more worried about their sort of medium-term prospects? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Race. And if I may, could I undertake to take that away and just put that on the table with the officers in the council who are kind of leading on all of this? And thank you for that. That's a very, very helpful kind of indicator to see if they can sort of create a metric around. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Race and Nicholson. Can I take Councillor Smythe's question next, and then I've got Councillor Lufkin and then Billington.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Nicholson, for your wonderful report there and all the hard work that you're doing to keep the borough afloat. The City of London Corporation have recently released a blueprint of their COVID-19 5-year recovery plan. It's due to be published in April, so I've not read the whole document, but there's some interesting elements to it. And as we're on the border, I'm just wondering, you know, are we going to have a recovery group to lead a kind of a post-recovery COVID-19 task force, for example? The task force says that you mentioned broadband earlier. They mentioned they want to invest in infrastructure, in the infrastructure of tomorrow. So this is to enable it to adapt and foresee changes in user demands in the future. They're looking at flexible and adaptable office space, resilience, renewable energy, universal broadband that you've kind of mentioned, and 5G. They also mentioned AI. They also want to put together a kind of thought leadership hub, and I'm wondering if we might want to partake in that, with their aim really ultimately to provide a vibrant retail, hospitality, cultural offering to engage, you know, sort of a dynamic and animated public. The retailers and the restaurants are suffering there as well as they are in Hackney. So I'm kind of just wondering, could we plan to have a COVID-19 recovery plan? Could we get together a task force? Could we work with the city on this? And could we think about investing in the infrastructure of tomorrow? As I've mentioned before, they specifically mention smart city technologies. So I'm just wondering if you could you don't have to answer all of those questions, there's a lot in there, but just in general. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Thank you very much. I think there's something just to reflect on here, if I may suggest, and perhaps the Commission might want to kind of also reflect on this going forward. Is it recovery or is it reopening? And what is it that we're trying to say here? I think perhaps the approach that we've been taking as an administration to date is to try and sort of consolidate the core economy as best we possibly can, so that once those doors get sort of unlocked and they start to reopen, then businesses are in a good place to be able to move forward, basically, and come back into trading, come back into business, and so on and so forth. Now, for some, as we've touched on, business hasn't stopped, it's carried on, but for many, it's a struggle for one reason or another. We've already kind of sort of touched on earlier, those that have just got to stop trading, full stop. The public health kind of criteria are such they cannot continue for the time being. And for those in that extreme situation, finding the support for them is quite crucial. And there's, to be quite frank, the council can play a role in that beyond lobbying, but only, of course, where it has a direct interest in it. It may be the landlord of the property that they may be working from, for example. However, the Corporation of London, as you rightly say, is talking about where is the square mile going next. Depending on who one talks to, places like the Square Mile, places like Canary Wharf, for example, some feel very confident that, look, it will all come back and it will at some point in the future. And it's a case of just gritting one's teeth and working your way through the current the current situation, the current scenario, and it'll all be fine at some point, 12 months' time or whenever. They may well be right, Councillor Smith. I mean, your guess is as good as mine, to be quite frank. There are others who are far more pessimistic about it and actually are seeing this as an opportunity to literally redesign, re-engineer some of our urban spaces. The Corporation of London, I would suggest, and I'm sure that they probably wouldn't mind me kind of saying this evening, but, are probably looking at a bit more of a balanced approach. What they're looking at is that there are parts of the Square Mile that will change. They will offer a very different economic offer. They had already started that work pre-COVID around one or two of their initiatives, one of those particularly being what they call the Culture Mile. But they were also showing a far keener interest on expanding the small business base within the Square Mile too, and across a varied sectors, more sectors than perhaps just financial services and fintech on its own. So they were certainly always looking at that. And what is clear in their draft thinking to date and their draft planning to date is that that is set to expand. We try to ensure that the council has a good, close working relationship with the Corporation of London, and what we have politically always tried to kind of take the line, Councillor Smith, is to say that, listen, the Culture Mile runs from the meat market, from Smithfield, over to Shoreditch. That is the culture mile, basically, for all sorts of reasons, and that is really important. It's an important statement that what we've got is that, you know, Shoreditch is the seat of the creativity in all of this culture mile. That's where the new ideas are coming out of, and not just the ideas in tech. It's the ideas across the arts and across the cultural sector, products, making things, that kind of stuff, but also a lot of heritage when it comes to the economy around the arts too. So what we're seeing there is a closer working alignment with the corporation. Do I personally think that the corporation is probably kind of heading in the right direction? I think that the corporation has always been slightly misunderstood, to be honest. I think in the past, it was always assumed that the Square Mile was a home to nothing other than giant banks, giant financial institutions, giant sort of international law companies, and so on and so forth. And it's true, they're all there, absolutely, or they certainly were all there. I suspect they will be into the future in one form or another anyway. But actually, they were also one of the largest clusters of smaller businesses in London. And you know, there were huge numbers of smaller businesses. So I think it's right that their focus is on looking to the entrepreneurs of tomorrow, being the incubator of new talent and new ideas in terms of economic development, and into the future, and starting to rethink their kind of planning policies, their development policies, their economic development policies for the future of the Square Mile, and looking at a slightly more diverse model. I like to think, Councillor Smith, that actually perhaps this is a sort of looking back to those days when people did used to really live and work and make things in the Square Mile a long, long time ago, admittedly, but that's what they used to do. And perhaps we're getting a little bit of a kind of a revisiting of that heritage, but in the economy of today and in today's terms. And my personal kind of sort of reflections on this is that this is something to be supported, actually, and that Hackney could, and all of us living and working in Hackney, could really thrive and prosper with such a proposition going on literally next door to us, but a stone's throw away in the Square Mile. This is a good thing. And so the offices are working quite closely together. So that still continues and will continue going forward. Beyond that of the rather dry and formal duty to cooperate, it goes beyond that, and it's a far closer working relationship when it comes to matters to do with economic development, physical development indeed as well. So hopefully that kind of responds to some of the things.
All right, thank you. I've got Councillor Lufkin, and then yeah, go on, Councillor Lufkin.
Yeah, thanks very much for that very interesting, useful update, Councillor Nicholson. I mean, it does seem every time we meet that the recovery looks further and further away. I mean, I remember talking to you in September, October, and you know, it was how we're going to plan the recovery after Christmas, and now here we are in January, and it looks a long way away still. But just on in terms of your update, I was wondering, have you getting any sense of how many of the hospitality and pub businesses are actually just gone, basically just are going to be closing for good, and what kind of percentage that represents overall? And I mean, and linked to that, what are the staff going to do? What opportunities are there to retrain, and what's going to happen to the buildings? So that was my first question. If you don't mind, Chair, I've just got a supplementary as well. Yeah, just according to some research that came out today from the Centre for the Economic Statistics Centre of Excellence, a large number of EU workers are leaving London. In fact, they put a quantity on it of 700,000, which is 7 or 8% of the entire population of London. Is that something that you're picking up on, or is that something that you've seen any evidence of yourself? Because the statistics are, I mean, they've done some research, but it's difficult. I mean, it must be difficult to compile those kind of statistics at the moment. And I just wondered if that fed into how what you were seeing as well. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor Lufkin. In terms of kind of, is there any kind of hard evidence, if I can describe it in that way, about the numbers of hospitality businesses that have just had to close their doors for the last time and just close the business down itself? I'm afraid we don't have that information either as an administration or as a council. It goes back, I think, to Councillor Race's earlier question about the kind of the economic observatory kind of purpose and function, if I may suggest, Councillor Lufkin, because yes, we can all look at the national statistics. Yes, we can all look at the regional statistics about things as sort of generic as, you know, those deregistering from paying VAT, for example, you know, which, of course, you know, as mentioned previously, those sorts of things have a use. They're kind of helpful to kind of give one a kind of a sense about what's happening to a sector. But unfortunately, what it doesn't do is sort of say, oh, yeah, well, in the London Borough of Hackney, you know, X number of businesses have literally closed their doors for the last time and will trade no more. If I may suggest, I think, like, in response to Councillor Race's sort of question about sentiment, if I may take that away and just sort of perhaps feed that into the work that's been sort of currently explored, and just seeing, you know, to what degree and to how fine a grain can that analysis be brought about, that understanding, and how can we keep on top of it too, obviously, because what we wouldn't want to do is to be using a statistic of businesses closed, say in 18 months time, when what we're seeing perhaps is a growth in a sector, you know, and we would obviously want to make sure that the council's fully aware of that, and that, you know, we can sort of make sure that the council can design its services around growth and an expansion and an increasing demand and so on and so forth. I think where there is a clear analysis, though, and I think it is worth just saying this, is that there is still the issue of business rates and having to pay those, which is of great concern to the viability of businesses, certainly for the next 6 months, and we've mentioned that one already. But the other is to do with rents. And we shouldn't forget, you know, that there are still kind of rental agreements in place, and those rents have to be paid at some point or another. And that is of concern for many trading in the borough. And then finally, there is the employment cost too. And I know we've touched upon that previously. I'm sure Councillor Williams will touch upon this. And that takes us off into the territory of furloughing. I think, you know, it's sort of, in terms of the EU workers and this sort of reduction that London is seeing in terms of total population, I think some of the figures that I have sort of noticed being reported are in the order of about a total of 900,000 people have, for one reason or another, have left London. They've left the capital. Now, clearly, some of those people have relocated to other parts of the United Kingdom. They've just left the city, full stop, and moved on in their lives. But your figure around EU workers, that too is a figure that I'm kind of have also noticed, and that there is clearly an effect beginning to kind of have an effect on our economy around not just the supply chains, the movement of goods. As we know, there are still great problems about the movement of services across the boundary between the UK and the EU single market. And that clearly has still got a long way to play out yet. But in terms of goods, there are issues that are beginning to emerge in terms of the supply chain. And that is also something that applies to the movement of labour too. In other words, the individual citizen. And I think quite what impact this will have on the borough, what I do understand is that where some of the kind of primary kind of sort of and the first impacts have been felt are both in agriculture and in the hospitality sector, and specifically around the hotel industries. The hospitality in terms of hotels. At this stage, Councillor Lufkin, office in a position to be able to kind of sort of give us some advice on where that is leading to in terms of the borough, I'm afraid. Sorry, Chair.
No, thank you very much. And sorry for having to come in there. Just wanted to just be conscious of time and make sure we're promptly sort of allowing time for the rest of the agenda. I believe Councillor Billington, you wanted to leave your point for the next item, which is with Councillor Williams. Yeah. Councillor Nicholson, thank you so much. I think I can speak on behalf of the whole commission when I can say that was very thorough, and obviously we got a lot of information from that. As always, when you join our commission, so we've again really appreciate your time, and thank you again for sort of your leadership on your portfolio, and please thank the officers as well. I know it's a very difficult time. So yeah, and if there are any specific items, we will kind of follow up. But again, as of where you think there are important updates based on the conversations that we've just had today, feel free to sort of just drop an email to us as well, just keeping us informed, particularly on some of the points around sort of neighbourhood seal and other areas that we've sort of raised.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for those nice compliments. And I know that officers will be kind of really kind of delighted to hear the Commission's sort of best wishes and their thanks for their work. So thank you for that. I'll make sure that they receive that message. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholson. Right, and now we've got Councillor Carol Williams. Thank you so much again for joining us. As we did with the previous item as well, if you want to, it's not obligatory, but if you want to start off with an update, if you don't want to and want us to crack on with questions, however you feel most comfortable, Councillor Williams.
Shall I just quickly give you a quick rundown?
Sure, that'd be great.
So I think Councillor Nicholson has already said that things are changing rapidly and continuing to change. We are in the employment and skills seeing an increase in demand for that service. The twin challenges of Brexit and coronavirus means that residents will be facing some serious barriers in the coming months and years, and we need to act quickly to prevent unemployment becoming embedded. And I think we are doing that. The last time I came to the Commission, it talks about how the Employment and Skills Service was restructuring and also integrating with adult learning to provide support to residents where it was needed. I gave you a quick overview of some of the employment programmes and where we have been having successes in those programmes. Of course, government funding will continue to present us with a challenge in terms of which of those programmes we can continue into the future. You already know the demand for the apprenticeship scheme. There's been a year-on-year increase in demand, particularly for those over 25 who want to retrain or re-enter the labour market. More women are applying for apprenticeship places, and there are slightly more older women. There's a good demographic mix, and of the 24 ICT apprentices who we've recruited, 46% of those are women. Clearly, Hackney can't deliver an apprenticeship offer that meets the needs of the entire borough, so we have to work with partners and employers to broaden that offer. We don't yet fully understand the impact for businesses and their ability to continue to deliver apprenticeships in the future. And that's why we have a broader offer, which we're developing, some of which you'll already be aware of. So, for example, the Kickstart scheme, which will offer paid work experience for 16 to 24-year-olds on universal credit and who are at risk from long-term unemployment. And the first information session on that is going to take place, I think it's next week. It's certainly the beginning of February, and I think that is next week, isn't it? We're already the 25th, so we have already cantered our way through the first month of 2021. We're in the process of developing and delivering on our STEM manifesto commitment, which was delayed last year to when COVID hit and when we went into lockdown. And we have a new officer who is developing that piece of work for us. I'd be more than happy when that vision is in more of a shape to bring to you to bring it to Scutiny for you to have a look at, should you wish to do so. The last time I attended the meeting, I also spoke to the Commission about the integration of adult learning in the Employment and Skills Service. That integration has now taken place and fully embedded. The next stage of the work will to develop an approach to adult learning, so Hackney residents have access to an excellent adult education programme that equips them with the skills that they will require to make informed choices on training that they do, education that they, adult learning programs that they take part in, and as they enter their pathway to employment, volunteering, or just entry-level non-accredited courses. And of course, we'll have to look at the balance between vocational courses and entry-level non-accredited accredited courses. Just really quickly, there just a few extra things. We recently successful in securing GLA funding relating to COVID-19 recovery, in line with council and GLA priorities, and we're planning to use funding to provide Chromebooks for adult learners. Last week, members received a briefing from Councillor Mackenzie on the work that he's been doing. He's leading on to improve high quality and affordable broadband for priority groups across Hackney estates. And you'll also know from the Aging Well strategy work that Councillor Maxwell is leading on, that the council has been focusing on promoting digital literacy and addressing digital exclusion among older residents. And I'll leave it there and come back with to respond to any questions that the Commission members may have for me.
Thank you, Councillor Williams, and also just again, you know, as with Councillor Nicholson as well, I think we want to be on record just to thank you again for your leadership in your portfolio, and also again, like for the officers for their hard work, both because obviously of the challenge through COVID, and then of course, you know, the challenge that we have around, you know, obviously the fact that some of our IT services have been sort of limited, but also the work that you've been leading on, particularly sort of on the qualities aspect and sort of the leadership of ethnic minorities, particularly sort of during the time of the Black Lives Matter movement as well. I think it's incredibly important, and you know, I think we're very lucky as a borough to have such a leading sort of powerful voice like yourself, which I think lots of other boroughs will be very jealous of us. So thank you for all your work. Councillor Billington, I'll kick off with you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Coburn. Councillor Williams, I wanted particularly to ask you some questions in relation to how we're going to recover from COVID and deal with the skills gaps and so forth, notwithstanding our already successful schemes in this regard, in the context of the new FE white paper, FE and skills white paper. There has been some proposals there for things like a local skills improvement plan, that in our context will be at London level. Bearing in mind Hackney is very different from Walthamstow next door, and also Wandsworth and Kingston right on the other side of the capital, and has extremes within it. How do you see Hackney being able to shape any local skills improvement plan at London level? Second question, it goes actually to some of the things that Councillor Nicholson said, so that's why I was going to ask it then, but I think it's probably best to ask you this question. One of the things they're looking at is the possibility of level 3 qualifications equivalent for people who haven't got them at any time during their life. And one of the key areas that you might want to enable people to access that for is our arts and culture, because it is a crucial part of our economy locally in Hackney and also in London. And yet there is every risk that that's not considered to be economically important enough to provide that training for people. And will you be speaking up for the chances of the workforce of Hackney, the unskilled workforce of Hackney, to learn the skills that they want in the arts and culture sector?
Councillor Williams, do you want to prefer?
Yeah, let's go. Do you want me to come back on that one, or do you want
yeah, we'll go one question at a time.
Yeah. So in terms of recovery and what we're doing in terms of recovery, I think there's a couple of things. I know that Councillor Nicholson did speak to recovery as well. Hackney is one of the 12 central London forward boroughs, and we know that we already make up a critical part of the national economy. We host 1 in 10 of the country's jobs, and we are vital in terms of delivering public services across the country, not just here in London. And there's also a significant number of people in the capital who live in poverty. So what we do next and our plan for recovery is actually really quite key.
Sorry, could I just come back on it? I was specifically asking about the white paper and the possibility of shaping the skills programme, the local skills improvement plan.
Yeah,
and how would we do that?
I think I am answering that, but maybe I can get straight to the point. So what I was saying was that we are one of these 12 central London forward boroughs. We are an active member of Central London Forward, and we play a key role in the delivery plan that is emerging from those Central London Forward boroughs, CLF boroughs. So I sit on that, Guy sits on that, and so we are absolutely central. I'll have to go back and just have a look at my most recent papers around post-16 education, though, Councillor Billington, to see what we are saying around post-16 education. And if it hasn't been included, then I will make sure that it is included the next time that we meet, because the announcement on the white paper was just made last week, and I think our agenda papers may already have been drawn up. So how you asked specifically about level 3 qualifications, let me just try and
the white paper suggests that people who haven't got a level 3 qualification could get one as part of the overall plan, but of course there's a risk that they will only be available if the qualification they're getting leads them to economically viable work. And of course we know that there is a bit of a snobbery against things like art and culture, even though they're a significant part of our economy, that, like Councillor Nicholson has pointed out. So I'm just asking, can we make a case for those kind of qualifications to be included, particularly in Hackney, because it's such a vital part of our local economy?
So we can make a case. I think that what we need to do is just have a look at all of the sectors that are being impacted by coronavirus and Brexit combined, and look at where our strengths lie in the borough. As I was saying in my introduction, we are specifically doing a piece of work on STEM. Now, of course, STEM cuts across all sectors. It's not just the digital and creative economy. It's not just about programming. It is about the construction sector. It is about health, and it also is about the creative economy as well. So I think that what I'm trying to say is, yes, there is a piece of work that we can do. We can push and promote that. But I think the other thing that is really missing from this question and this part of the discussion is funding for further education, and the lack of funding, or the continued reduction of funding over the last 10 years we've seen from central government, and the provisions within that white paper for funding. So I think learners are going to struggle whatever the level 3 offer is going to be. There isn't a sustained funding programme, from what I can tell, that was in the announcement last week, and there's an offer of student loans. And of course, we know, based on the demographics of Hackney residents, that that is not going to be an answer for their future education and their future employment prospects. And that's very challenging in a borough with our demographics. So I do think there is a piece of work that we need to do, and calling on government to put further education on a sustained funding footing.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any other questions for Councillor Williams? Members? Councillor Smythe?
Yeah, thank you. and thank you, Councillor Williams. Just on the sort of on the digital skills and digital employment opportunities, because I think that that's kind of coming down the line. And I know that, you know, Councillor Nicholson has mentioned broadband. I've mentioned universal broadband services. We've got 5G coming to the borough. I mean, what are we doing in terms of sort of digital skills? Are we really pushing that? Because I think that's going to be a very important attribute for skills in the future. Thank you.
So and this is the real focus of this piece of work on our STEM manifesto commitment. In 2018 we were elected on a manifesto in which we said that we would develop this piece of work around STEM to ensure that Hackney residents have the skills that they require to work in the sector that's right on our doorstep, both here in Shoreditch but also over at Here East in the Olympic Park. That's a piece of work that's underway, Councillor Smith. So we are developing how we do that, how we work with schools and how we work with the FE colleges within the borough to ensure that residents have access to the training that they require. But it's not just through the schools or colleges, but our own adult education offer as well. So that is a piece of work that is ongoing, and of course more than happy to bring more detailed work back to you in the future if that's something that you want to have a look at.
Yeah, and just one more point, just on digital access. You know, the access to connectivity, which has obviously been a theme that's been running through kind of education and COVID and sort of digital exclusion and everything. Because I think digital connectivity is another crucial element to this. And I mean, I'm really pleased to see the council working on the broadband thing. It's something I've been advocating for a long time, but I think we really need to push it now. Thank you.
I can't disagree with that. I think that we are doing a great piece of work already. I think Councillor Mackenzie is leading on that. I think that the piece of work that Councillor Maxwell is leading on is really moving us forward so that we can ensure that older people have access to the skills that they need, whether it is to go shopping online or whether it is to use WhatsApp so that they can stay connected to their family and friends while they're in lockdown. And it was a couple of meetings ago that I spoke at this commission on the digital inclusion work that we are doing. So it is being led across a number of portfolios, including Councillor Nicholson's, the Mayor, Councillor Mackenzie and myself, as well as Councillor Kennedy. So there is this cross portfolio and cross cabinet member focus on digital inclusion for the borough.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Race, did you have your mute button off, assuming you want to go next?
I'm okay at the moment, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I thought, is it Councillor Lufkin I could see then with the hand raised?
Thanks, Councillor Williams. I'd just like to ask my usual question about how our award-winning apprentice programme is getting on and how our apprentices are finding it in what must be a really crazy time for many of them to start a working career. You know, how's I mean, lots of them may be living at home and things like that, and how are they finding you know, working, and how is the council supporting them, and what are the plans, you know, into the future? Thanks very much.
We certainly haven't entered any awards this year, so unfortunately, or last year rather. So unfortunately, this year we're not going to win any awards. Our apprenticeship team had to focus on responding to the pandemic last year, ensuring that our interns, supported interns, adult trainees and apprentices had the support that they needed to successfully complete their training programme and the programmes that they were on. We have, both Phil and I have met all of our apprentices, all our interns and all of our trainees, and attended their graduation there's been a number of graduation ceremonies throughout the lockdown period, and we've attended those and spoken to them. I think it'd be safe to say that they've all expressed gratitude for the support that the council has given to them, particularly adult trainees as well, with ESOL support needs. They have been incredibly grateful for the fact that the traineeship programme is paid. And that has continued. There was a bit of a hiatus where trainees didn't have digital devices. They were provided, the council provided those devices to them so that they could continue their training, their 1 day a week training online, and where possible, when restrictions were lifted, they could continue their face-to-face work placements as well. There's growing demand, as I was saying in my introduction, for the apprenticeship programme. I'm hoping we have got the most recent data for the apprenticeship programme work placements, as well as the use of the levy that focuses on the I think it's the third quarter. And what I hope to be able to do is organise a briefing for members, so you can look at some of those statistics in great detail, including the number of completions, the breakdown across directorates, where there is more room for directorates to increase the number of apprentices that they offer to Hackney residents, as well as the number of apprentices across the council that has helped to increase local recruitment to the council. And that is a key focus and a key part of the work that we are doing. We do want Hackney residents who live locally to work for the council, and the apprenticeship programme is actually key to that. There's been a number of our interns and supported interns and adult trainees who have gone on to successfully apply for our apprenticeship programme as well. So the pathway that we have created is showing some success. So our adult trainees and our supported interns have a programme to move on to. They don't just go off on their own at the end of it. So I think we are growing talent within the council, and on Wednesday I'll be bringing a paper to full council, of course, on the gender and ethnicity pay gap, and you'll be able to see over time how the apprenticeship programme is helping to close both of those gaps.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Williams. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much, Councillor Williams, for joining us this evening. I just wanted to ask a similar question to Councillor Lufkin, but from the aimed at the other side, I suppose. So, just how has the relationship with the employers in Hackney who provide the placements for us been across the last kind of year? Do they remain kind of enthusiastic and willing to work with us, or have we seen a sort of drop off in their ability in some cases? I'm sure ability to participate and to actively support.
Councillor Race, is that something that I can come back to you on in writing? I am trying to get to the bottom of the extent of continued engagement with employers and the challenges that they face given the current lockdown situation and their prospects for reopening, and also what the prospects are for staff who they have furloughed. So I'm not sure that I can give you a credible update at this stage. So can I come back to you on that?
Yep.
Councillor Palace.
Yes, thank you very much for the update so far and for all you're doing. Yeah, this is just almost a matter arising, I think, from the last meeting, and I think it's, as I've said many a time, a kind of untapped resource in many respects in terms of kind of council services, which is around resident participation and about the opportunity that there is there kind of in terms of adult education. And I believe the there is going to be an update to the resident participation strategy, maybe March, April, and I was just wondering if there's any further update about future collaborations between yourself and the resident participation team, particularly around kind of the agile education services that could be offered directly to tenants, kind of through the resident participation team and that collaboration. Thanks.
I don't recall this from the last meeting. I'm terribly sorry. So you're talking about Hackney Housing. You might need to prompt me a little bit more.
No, it basically as within Hackney Housing there is resident participation team, and one of the things that we've been working on in our ward in particular is around trying to link up resident participation with other services and trying to bring services, as it were, to tenants and those who are maybe vulnerable, isolated, but also particularly young people on Hackney Housing estates. And I just think there could be a real opportunity for a collaboration between the two. I think it was quite a bit of time ago that I think I raised it, so it's just one that I just wanted to kind of flag. And again, it'd just be about whether there's the potential there for kind of collaboration and to feed into the strategy which is happening. But I think it's mostly one to take away.
Yeah, can Chair, if I might, can we take that one away and speak offline as well about
Sure.
the detail of that?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to propose that we close this item now. I think we've just been good on time, actually. But yeah, thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to add, Councillor Williams, before we?
No, I don't think so. I think that we have gone over quite a lot of detail there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for inviting me along this evening and for taking again an interest in the Employment and Skills and Adult Learning Service.
No, thank you again for, as I say, for all your hard work and your leadership in your portfolio, and also to the officers who are working day in and day out to make sure that they're providing those opportunities for our local residents. Great. Councillor Nicholson and Councillor Williams, feel free to leave the meeting if you want. I know you're probably zoomed out from meetings this morning, so yeah, I wouldn't take no offence if you're not here for the next bit of the meeting.
Thank you. Thanks. Good night.
Bye, everyone. Good night. Thanks.
Thanks.
Right, back to the business of this meeting. We'll now progress on to the work programme. We are obviously...
Sorry, Chair, before we move on,
sure.
Sorry, we've got a few actions to take away from those two sections. I just wondered, could we make sure that they're minuted and that there's a process for following up? Make sure that the written responses that are circulated as well.
Sure. Tim, would it be possible if you can just send over the sort of the actions from the notes that you've taken, and just maybe send that on an email to all the commission members just to quickly add any, if just to make sure it reflects what the actions are, and then obviously if there's anything that additionally that needs to be changed, then commission members can come back and then we can then sort of proceed and agree on how we're going to sort of follow up on those actions.
Absolutely, I'll circulate that after the meeting.
Thank you.
Just in relation to the work programme now, obviously we have to be mindful that we are in the process of, well, we've got local elections taking place in May for the London mayoral and the London Assembly elections, which means that the purdah period kicks in, I believe, usually like 23rd of March, something like that.
I think that's it, yeah.
23rd of March, okay, perfect, got it right. I believe our meeting is earlier than that, so we will have one more meeting, I think is on the 10th of March. Tim, am I right on suggesting that?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So we'll have one more meeting beforehand, and then obviously there'll be no meetings until after the local elections take place. Now, in terms of the meeting for March, we had plans to look at sort of the Tim, did you want to sort of just take us through the sort of the three areas, which was around sort of like the resilience of our economy?
Yes. So what we've got provisionally penciled in for March is building back better post COVID-19. Not sure if that is maybe slightly premature. Might have been optimistic. Also, the economic strategy moving forward for big events like COVID occurring, and also the resilient strategy. Did I already say that? Resilient strategy and economic strategy as two separate items.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, could that all be put under the umbrella of a COVID-19 recovery plan?
Yeah, so it'll be basically three areas. So the first one is around Build Back Better, which obviously I know you will have all seen. You know, it's the document that Phil has been sort of like the mayor has been obviously promoting, and obviously there's been work through sort of that we've been engaged in via different sort of avenues like Labour Group and other areas. The economic resilience strategy, these are like the strategies that the council has in place for major sort of times like now, basically, and obviously I think that will all be reviewed. I don't know, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, but are they being reviewed now as of whilst we're still going through COVID, or is it something that they'll probably do in reflection?
It's something they'll probably do in reflection. I think the reaction has been to based around emergency. I don't think there's been much forward thinking.
Exactly, yeah. I wouldn't think there would be anyway. I think it would be a bit too premature as well, just because like there'll still be a lot of learning that will happen over the next sort of couple of months. So really, I mean, I think one thing that is missing from the Commission's work plan is obviously I think the problem with when we keep continuing to bring back Councillor Nicholson and others is obviously it's the fact that, you know, the situation is continuously evolving and we end up sort of like almost like back into the cycle of obviously going back into restrictions or to another lockdown. So we end up revisiting the same conversation, which is nothing wrong with that, obviously, because, you know, the situation is evolving and we need to be sort of like scrutinizing their work. But I do think that one of the things that we have been lacking, and I think which will be really good to sort of bring to the Commission, and we don't have to necessarily decide it now, but it'll be good to get your views on it, is I do think whilst we are living through the pandemic, I think it will be very important that we do listen to sort of the lived experiences of our residents. And, you know, we've heard a lot from businesses, that's great. And I think we could definitely do with sort of capturing the very raw feelings of residents. So I would propose like some sort of engagement session with some external sort of expertise, particularly on this area around building back better. So, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with having officers or cabinet members, but I think that having a much more sort of external facing engagement session will probably be more worth it. And then obviously what I would suggest is if there are statutory, like if there are stuff that are related to cabinet members or to officers, we can ask for written kind of updates to kind of update the Commission either before or after the meeting. But happy for any suggestions. Sam, I know you raised your Councillor Palace, I know you raised your hand.
I was just thinking about the Young Futures Commission, that it might be worthwhile, you know, checking in with them, particularly around, you know, young people and COVID and, you know, education skills, you know, and apprenticeships and about shaping that, and maybe that could form part of kind of the stakeholders we want to kind of reach out to.
Yeah, I think certainly it'll be important to reach out to them. Particularly, I think the only thing that I'd be mindful of is, I mean, and again, there's a slight problem, which is that we need to be like, I want to reach out to people who we ordinarily wouldn't hear from. I think the Young Futures Commission is important, but I think they've got avenues in which they typically have their voices heard, and particularly the members of the Commission. If there are ways where we can have other young people from Hackney who aren't necessarily linked to the Commission, that might be more powerful, as, you know, like we want to, you know, like I guess what we want the Commission to be is an avenue where people who don't typically have their voices heard have that opportunity. The challenge, obviously, during COVID is where do you get these people from? So we're just going to have to rely a lot on our partnerships and sort of networks to do that. But I definitely do agree with you, Sam, that we do need a representation of groups of society who are most likely being hard impacted, obviously young people being one of them.
Chair, is it
Sorry?
would it be like a kind of community conversation, that type of thing?
Yeah, so what I'm proposing is something similar to what we've done, like, for example, with the previous Nighttime Economy Summit, or the business engagement, or when we've done, for example, the transport meeting as well. Something that is a bit more kind of like engagement led. So it's kind of less like, you know, inviting people to just give talks, but more kind of actually where we're sort of part of the conversation, and there's like breakout rooms. And when I spoke to the commission, to the head of IT before, they did say that in certain occasions they would allow us to use different platforms. So for example, if we were to do like a breakout room session where we have like different rounds and different questions, we can use Zoom and go out to breakout rooms. And I think it just might be a bit different and more powerful, because I'm just quite conscious that these meetings are becoming slightly repetitive, in the regards that, as I say, like, we're in danger of kind of revisiting the same conversations. Although they are necessary, we're not really thinking forward, and I just think that might be important. Councillor Race?
I was just going to throw in also the group of people around, you know, the I think it's 3 million of the freelancers and others who've received no support at all over the last kind of year, because I think I get the feeling there are quite a lot of those in Hackney in particular, so it might be useful to hear from them as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, I'd particularly like to hear from Excluded UK about the freelancers and people with micro businesses and people who just completely lost out from all of that. It's not only in the arts and culture sector, but there is a lot of that where we will see it in our borough, and also the gig economy. I'm wondering whether we can ask people like some of the companies like Deliveroo, how they are protecting their own workforce when they are basically gig workers delivering food to the rest of us who are locked down, thinking because they are young men they're invincible, and pretty much spreading it to each other and to everybody else in order to be able to keep that. And they're not going to get tested, are they?
No.
If I was a 25-year-old man, I'd think I was invincible. I wasn't going to get tested, and I'm also going to lose money.
It could be an Amazon angle there, obviously, because they're obviously in the borough, and we have a relationship with them, so we may not want to do that, but they're in the borough and they have all the delivery drivers, obviously, and a lot of gig and sort of third-party workers, third-party organisations.
We should definitely, I agree. I think we should definitely look at sort of.
I think there's a case for us exploring the key workers in the private sector, because obviously there's a recognition of who the key workers are in the public sector, and of course there's a case for a strong case for vaccination amongst teachers and so forth. But I think we must acknowledge that the people who are really on the front line of this tension between the economy and public health are quite often those people working on the very lowest wages in the private sector, of which we have an enormous number in our borough. And we need to be working out not only how to protect them health-wise, but also to protect them economically. And no one's got an answer for them on that right now. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, I think that's very important. And I think, as you say, like, I think you phrased it very well as well, like the key workers in the private sector, because as you say, very important to the economy ticking day to day, but no one's really talking about them as much. Cool. So are we all in agreement that that's something that we would like to do, like a bit more of a public engagement session?
Could we also do something on the economic impact on mental health problems as a result of this? I mean, people basically are going to have to be signed off because they're not working effectively. I don't know what there is on that, but it's another kind of economic aspect to the health crisis.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just trying to think. I would,
because normally we'd go on mental health in terms of the crisis on the service, all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Rather than saying that, it's people can't, if they're not able to work because of this, or that the way they are having to work is contributing to a health crisis, which is therefore inhibiting their ability to work. That's a vicious economic cycle, not just a vicious health.
Of course. Yeah, no, of course, I agree. Okay, well, let's maybe, I think probably we're going to talk after anyway, so I think when we're shaping this, let's try to think about how we shape the conversation in a way which, as you say rightly, sort of like looks at the sort of the economic impact of mental health, because that's definitely something very real.
Mete, can I just raise one little thing just about the neighbourhood sill piece? Can we get a date from Guy about when he thinks it will come to the commission? Because I think it'd be really important in terms of specifically forming the metrics around that.
Tim, can you, is it all right if we write that to Guy as a
email? Of course. I'll add that as an action and I'll make sure it's done.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm going to send you guys an idea probably by, I think Tim, we're not going to have Tim, we're not going to have any officers or cabinet members who are going to have to present for this next meeting on March. So we don't need to let them know this week, do we?
No. No, if we want to do mostly community engagement, there's no need for that.
Perfect. Okay, so in that case, then I'll circulate something to the commission members to review probably next week, Monday or Tuesday. And then if you could just all have a glance over it. And then also, Tim, separate to that as well, if you could send over sort of the action points from this meeting, including the points that just Councillor Palace raised as well, that'd be great. Cool. Keeping the agenda item moving, is there any other business? I don't have anything, but if anyone has anything they'd like to raise, please let me know. No? Well, in that case, I shall end the meeting 15 minutes earlier than planned.
Well done.
Yeah. That makes up for all of the other additional 15 minutes. All right, then. Well, have a great evening, and thank you everyone for tuning in, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.